Okay, gut. Dann fangen wir an, oder? Perfekt. Gut, willkommen an alle. Welcome to everybody. We are glad to have you all with us for the first edition of our new Bauhaus City Dialogues. This is a special format that is connected to our master urban design studio this summer that works on this topic, New Bauhaus City, that is inspired by the New European Bauhaus Initiative that has been started by European Commission some months ago and is touching the very crucial topic of climate change. No? And we all now know in the meantime the numbers that, for example, 40% of CO2 emissions are caused by buildings. And so architecture and cities play a major role in this context. Until now, this is mainly addressed in a technical way. Now we are speaking about energy efficiency, about building materials, all these things, no? And our idea is to, and this is the idea of the new European Bauhaus, no? To transform this move towards a more resilient and a more sustainable city into a cultural project that deals with new aesthetics, with sustainability for architecture and the city. And our special focus is on the city, no? So asking, let's say, before we do technical interventions, before we isolate, before we use new materials, we have to talk about how will we live in the future, how will we work, how will we move. No, because this, let's say, principles and the way we live, we organize, we build our cities influence in the end much, much more than technical aspects of buildings. So that's the background for this title, New Bauhaus City. And our special focus is not only on cities in terms of metropolis, but on a vast range of urban phenomena, no? That should include also medium and small cities and the territory, that plays a major role in this whole context. Well, and with our master students this summer, we are experimenting in new ideas, new projects in a lot of different places inside and outside of Germany. There's also one student from Peru, for example, that is working on this topic on a place in Peru. And this dialogue series aims now to, I would say, to widen the field, and to start dialogues with and for sure, between guests. And so it's like a double meaning. We want to give this word dialogue, between two guests that we choose, especially for this event, and to get into dialogue with the guests. And I thank you very much, Severine and Elena, for making it possible to be with us today. Well, Ricarda, who organized this whole dialogue series, will now, together with Federica, give a little introduction before we start with the speeches.
Yes. From my side, many welcome to this first event, the New Bauhaus City Dialogues. And many thanks to all that made this possible, to Elena Militello and Severine Marguin, and to Professor Schröder and my colleagues Federica Scafidi and Alisa Disch, and our tutor Leandra Leipold, who helped with the organization. Maybe one little organizational thing in advance. This lecture series is recorded also on YouTube, so it's live there, visible. And just that everybody who participates knows that this is going on in the background, and that with attending you agree to this. The idea of this lecture series was really to open the discussion in urbanism and to start also an interdisciplinary exchange, which is why we wanted to invite the two guests we always also have here today, which will present a little bit about their work and their research. And then we are looking forward to discuss together with the students also some questions on urbanism, but also on the field that you are working in, of course. And yes, we hope it's a format that works well. It's a little experiment, and each dialogue is based on a specific topic. Today we have the topic of urbanism and new work. Then we will have the topic of experiments and the topics of art in urbanism, let's say. So today we are very, very happy to have you here, Elena Militello and Severine Marguin. And we would shortly like to introduce you, and please correct us if there's something wrong. And afterwards we would give the stage to you. Yes, so Severine Marguin is director of the Methods Lab in the Collaborative Research Center Re-Figuration of Space at the TU Berlin. And she's working currently at in her habilitation on relations between sociology and design, looking at interdisciplinary cooperation in spatial science and also methodological discourse on visual instruments for spatial research. She is also a research fellow at Einstein Research Project, Autonomy and Functionalisation, and at the Cluster of Excellence, Knowledge Gestaltung at Humboldt-Universität Berlin. And maybe also interesting for our dialogue today that she gained her PhD in Sociology of Work and Sociology of Art at the Leuphana University in Lüneburg and the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales in Paris. Sorry. And yeah, just maybe to give some more points is some aspects she's focusing in her publications and lectures, which is sociology of science, sociology of work, interdisciplinary, mixed methods and visual methods, and also experimentalization, which I think fits very well for today. So welcome, Severine.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and so welcome also from my side, and it's a pleasure to listen to your lecture and then also to this open debate. And I'm going to introduce Elena Militello. We met some months ago at the beginning of this project, Self-Working, and she's a lawyer and researcher at the University of Messina. She did her PhD in Law and Humanities at the University of Insubria with some visiting research in USA, Luxembourg, and Germany. And she's the founder of the project Self-Working in collaboration with the Fondazione École and Global Sharpers Palermo Hub. And with Self-Working, they work on the current trend of working remotely. That is really an important issue today. And then they try to elaborate policy proposals to reduce the economic, social, and territorial gap, especially in Italy. And so for today, I'm going to the second slide. The main and common keywords that we are going to now see during this two lectures are, as also my colleague Ricarda mentioned before, urbanism, new works, co-working, remote working, collective, creativity, and innovation. And so I leave the stage to Dr. Severine Marguin, maybe for sharing the screen and starting with the presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much for this introduction. I share my screen. Here we go. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be here and to present my work around the topic of new ways of working. I think I could talk about it from various perspectives, whether applied to the field of the arts, the field of design, or the field of science. and maybe, or in particular, the intersection of all these fields. What I associate with the new way of working is a longing for collectivity, for new forms of cooperation, so to say, of being together, in this tension between individualization and collectivity. I carried research on artist collective and their artist-run spaces in Berlin, or on audacious collaboration in the field of knowledge production. And yeah, maybe each time I tried to think this collectivity from a spatial perspective, asking the question, yeah, what for role does space play in the enactment of cooperation? Today, I'm going to talk mainly about collaboration in the academic field, and I warn you, I would like to make a very clear plea for interdisciplinarity, and especially interdisciplinarity between architecture and sociology. For that, I will rely on two research projects I'm part of. The first one is ArchitecturesExperiments from the Cluster of Excellence Image Knowledge Gestaltung of the Humboldt-Universität Berlin, where I conducted together with an architect and interaction designer a design-based field experiment about space in interdisciplinary rock constellation. We designed 18 settings to observe what impact a space on the collaboration between researcher, and the main goal was to develop out of the empirical research characteristic of what we've called a collaborative habitat. Here you can see some data we collected. The second project I will relay on through the talk is the actual big research project I'm a part of, the CSC 1265 Re-Figuration of Spaces, led by the sociologist Martina Löw, to which architect and planner take part as well, and where we tried all together to produce knowledge about space and its profound transformation since the 60s. I'll try to be clear, but you have to know that I somehow have a kind of a double hat on my head. On the one hand, I'm working in diverse research projects with architects very closely, and we produce new theory, new method for the research on space. And on the other hand, I'm doing my habilitation from a perspective of theory of science, where I reflect on this kind of collaboration, and where I try to understand what does design do to science and vice versa. So on a much more meta level. So that's why when I'm talking about interdisciplinarity between sociology and architecture, I want to do that not only theoretically, what it means to think the spatial and the social together, but also methodologically, so how to research on space from an interdisciplinary perspective, and without hiding the challenges or the meaning of such cooperation for what we call science or knowledge production. And because, it's a broad interdisciplinarity in which the disciplinary integration between sociology on the hand, architect and planners on the other hand, proves to be complex, and because at first sight it's not directly compatible. So that will be also the plan I want to, or the small journey I want to take you on with. So thinking the spatial and the social together, urban research, urban design, urban studies, urban planning, architectural research, spatial sociology, architectural sociology, urban sociology, planning sociology, cultural geography, and so on. There is a multiplication of specialized interdisciplinary branches in the field of spatial and urban research since the early 2000s. That's just a small amount of them. When we can see that there is a kind of rapprochement between maybe two fields, I interpret it as an acute actuality of trying to think the spatial and the social together. And for sociologists, it means trying to think materiality, and this seriously. And for architect, it means trying to think the human, and this also quite seriously. So I think that, that the claim we would do at the CSC Re-Figuration of Space, that actually you can't properly think the social without taking into account the dimension of space. And on the other hand, or the other way around, if you want to overcome an understanding of space as a container and try to understand the complexity of what space is and which quality it can have, you have to take into account the people acting not in the space, because, here comes the box again, but much more through the action, activating the space, unfolding it, if you want. And that the whole idea of a more relational space understanding. It's that new, because it's about new work. It's about like, okay, interdisciplinarity, that's the new thing. And you could say there were already attempts of collaboration between sociologists and architects in past decades. In my research, I did examine the relationship between architecture and sociology through an historical lens. So trying to see if architect and architectural researcher worked or used to work together with sociological knowledge, or even collaborate with sociologists and vice versa. And try to reconstruct a kind of narrative that demonstrates that despite repeated attempts at a rapprochement, collaboration did not become really sustainable until, and that would be my claim, the early 2010. And here I think you recognize this in the 30s, and then in the 70s, you have like this kind of rapprochement, but it's much more from the side of actually like sociology coming into the field of architecture, or architect trying to somehow attract sociologists, but much more the kind of auxiliary science role. And from the side of the sociologists, you don't have actually any interest until the special term and until the early 2000s for architecture or space in a materialist way. But you can see that then at the maybe the 2000 2010 it's always quite difficult to really date that. We can witness a kind of interest between the discipline currently, where this kind of interdisciplinarity not only take place at the incorporation, but much more from equal to equal, involving architect, planner, sociologists all together. And I can witness quite a lot of projects, like the newest one, maybe of a bigger scale, is this a new excellence cluster, a cluster of excellence in Stuttgart, computational architecture, led by Achim Mendes, where there is also sociologists involved and so on. So that would be maybe the kind of first point I would like to make. What does it mean on the level of method? Okay, we can see that both parts agree about the necessity to think space in its complex entanglement with the social, but how to do that, with which method? And at the CSC, we think that such cooperation between design and social science can respond to a really acute need in the empirical research on space that is reaching its limits in view of the transformation that is currently undergoing. So space is becoming basically too complex, or has become in the last decade, much in the course of globalization and digitalization, far too complex that somehow traditional method of empirical research could tackle. So we think that we need new method for spatial research. And in order to synchronize and bring together different methodology within and across discipline, we established at the CSC the Method Lab, and the lab supports the proposal of this integration of method. Basically, it's about coordinating methodical knowledge transfer among the discipline and developing together an interdisciplinary methodological discourse. And so if I may, because it's really fresh, how do you say that? Just published that last week, actually. So it's fresh, like an interdisciplinary handbook for qualitative and visual methods of spatial research. And I've done that with actually 3 designers, 2 planner and 1 architect. And we tried really to, with around 25 authors from a wide range of disciplines: urban planning, architecture, sociology, geography, anthropology, political science, and so on. We tried to actually collect it, different methods and instruments that have been actually established and proven in this different field, but never somehow put together. So you can see it's in German, because obviously it's a handbook in German, but you have like really different, a lot of different instruments in order to do, maybe to make this interdisciplinary research, how to do that practically. The other thing we've been trying to experiment, let's say at the CSC, is the establishment of new methods of all around this instrument of mapping. We funded 2018 a working group, hybrid mapping method, at the CSC, with the objective to develop a new hybrid mapping methodology at the interface of social science and spatial design. So drawing together the analytical and projective modes within the respective discipline and combining both visual and textual means of inquiry. I mean, mapping are really well proven and common practice in architecture and urban planning. And architect and planner learn to understand, imagine, design space. I don't have to tell you that, through planning. But however, even if the practice of mapping is well established, in the practice, this discipline often lacks methodological reflection. And that's where somehow the collaboration with sociology can maybe become really productive. So in a way to try to frame, actually, with the rigor of methodology coming from the spatial science, the practice of the well-established practice in the architecture and planning. So we've tried within actually studio or seminar different mapping approach, where the idea was to combine heterogeneous data and frame it with a kind of methodological discourse. We called it mappings as joint spatial display. Joint display is a really well established discourse in the mixed method and social science, mixed methods debate in the social science, and it's about trying to integrate different kind of data. And mapping actually does that every time, and but it's not really reflected as such. And so the idea is to try to reflect mapping as an analytical tool to produce, able to produce reliable results about the observed phenomenon. And the point is to develop standardized interpretation in the sense of a step-by-step guide, because the most important point remains the traceability of the interpretation. So how do we, as researcher, arrive at this one interpretation? Because mapping, like a lot of many visual artifacts, tend in their artfulness to represent a truth, but we shouldn't never forget that this obviously only the results of a specific construction process, which must necessarily be reflected in a really small and tedious way. So that's maybe the kind of discourse we are really taken in. Okay, now I'm running. I have a couple of minutes still. I would like to come to the third point. So, yeah, interdisciplinarity requires not only an open dialogue about the what, so the social and the spatial, or the how, the method, but also about for what reason, with what purposes, and for which readership I am producing this finding as a researcher. And I would say this is where cooperation starts to crack or to become really challenging, and can sometimes even appear irreconcilable. Sociologists and architects pursue different goals, which often unfold across the line between basic and applied research, so that one quickly finds oneself in this tension between what may be labeled as ivory tower for the sociologist and pure commissioned work for the designer. And this expresses itself in different surrenders that can lead to frustration on both sides. So like when architects ask sociologists, but wait, why don't you act? Are you afraid of action? I've been asked that once. And we were like, several sociologists, and we were like, well, what do you mean with action? Because yeah, obviously we are a bit afraid of action. Or vice versa, when sociologists shake their heads at the rather spongy or maybe widely mixed theoretical constructs of architects and planners. And the cooperation can somehow become caught in the conflicting polarities between praxis versus theory, action, applied research versus basic research, synthetic versus analytical science, and so on. And yeah, we are always a bit caught into this clear duality, which could look like that. But, and that is where it's become really interesting but complex at the same time, is this polarizing duality is not really satisfactory as a position of the researcher, whether sociologist or designer, are much more complex than that. And not only what they want to do, but also what they are expected to do. And it's always like kind of a negotiation, permanent negotiation. And maybe I would like to finish this small input by giving you an example out of my own practice as a cluster of excellence at the HU Berlin, and doing so, closing a bit the circle with the introduction, to show how the recipient and the purposes of our interdisciplinary research back then really somehow oscillated between different logic and remains really ambivalent for everyone. I mean, for us, for the big chief, for the supervisor, and maybe even for the people who funded the project. So originally, the project of the experimental zone was show the setting, like where we somehow designed 18 settings, and then we observed and we tried to understand how the researcher who had their daily work there, how they cope somehow with the spatial transformation we were making, and try to understand how, yeah, the role of space on the collaboration. And originally, the project was conceived by the designer, so by the architect and the interaction designer, together with the spokesperson of the cluster, who were from the cultural studies and art history department, actually, of the HU Berlin. The aim was to find special solution to increase the productivity of the researcher within the cluster. So we were to design special settings, test them with quantitative method, and finally evaluated them. And the project was really a kind of showcase of the cluster, and received a lot of visitors from the field of university and research politics and so on. the thing is, when our team, so at the somehow the assistant researcher level, if you want, were formed, we decided as project staff to reorient the project and to push it more in the direction of a more qualitative, experimental, basic research with irritation and optimization. So it was not just about trying to find the better optimal solution. And it was somehow really weird to have to control and observe our own colleague in order to increase their productivity. I mean, we said like, no, come on, no way, we can't do that. And then we say, actually, we're much more interested in somehow producing theory and new method and trying to understand what is space of knowledge. And so going into this direction. And actually, this problematization, so not thinking in solution, but much more in problem, actually, was really welcomed by the supervisors, because they're all doing basic research, actually, and they're all coming out from the humanities. But this only up to the time where of the new proposal for the next cluster, when the supervisor had to urgently ask, where they urgently asked us for concrete and proof solution, because they had to somehow fill up the evaluation. And it was not really, hard fact. It was just, yeah. So in contrast, our methodological as well as theoretical or empirical contribution to spatial research did not really appear to count or be valuable. But we say, yeah, we can't do that either. That was actually what we've done. So we stuck by our plan, but then it didn't end there, because actually 1 year later, after the project was long finished and we were finishing the book, because it's always a bit later on, as we know, so we published actually as a team our project publication, and we worked out 5 concrete statements at the end of this detailed basic research. We made at the end some, we had to, it was just because actually we fancied to. And it's just like for you to show, I hope it was a bit clear how actually it's so ambivalent, and the position can evolve, and it's really actually kind of mutual inspiration and also influence that both sides can have on each other. So I certainly influenced the other to go into the direction of basic research. And at the end, I said, come on, actually, it would be so nice to do some recommendation. I would never have come to the idea before the interdisciplinary work, actually. And maybe to finish my talk, the thing is, at the end, there is no right or wrong. And it is not, I think it's just a matter of, if you want to work within the interdisciplinary frame, then you have really to be aware of, I think, these 3 levels of, on the one side, what is the object, how to somehow understand space and social and so on the level when you can understand each other, which method you want to implement. But these 2 levels are actually, you can discuss them and you can somehow rely on literature and so on. And it's doable, I would say. The 3rd level, it's really like concern the very existential motive of why you are doing what you want to do. And then it's I think it's always the level that is really cracking and really pushing each other to the end, and where it's the only solution is trying to become aware of why I'm doing that like that, and trying to find a kind of solution altogether. I think that's it. Coming to the end was my small insight into interdisciplinarity in the spatial research field. Okay. Now I will just stop the screen sharing, right?
Thank you very much, Severine. It was a great perspective into questions you address in your research, and also the problems that it brings putting the disciplines together. I would propose that we switch to Elena and then talk together after the second lecture, if it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Elena?
Guten Abend und Dank für Ihre Anleitung. I will now switch to English, despite my wish to also speak in German, since I don't have that chance anymore. I'm very glad that I get to speak at this conference and at this dialogue today. And I'm very grateful to the University of Hannover and to Federica, of course, for the invitation, and Ricarda for the perfect organization. I hope that you can see my screen, and I will now proceed if it works. Yes, it should be working. Just give me a little nodding. Perfect.
Works.
Thank you. So my speech today has to learn a lot from what Dr. Marguin was saying, since I'm actually coming from an academic perspective on law, on legal issues, whereby only at the end of my doctoral work in 2019, I started to perceive a truly interdisciplinary approach, and that was only with sociology of law. And since I received my PhD in criminal procedure, so something very specialistic, very specific. But then I was working as a researcher in Luxembourg when the pandemic hit in March 2020. And I was personally attacked by the fact that I was living in a very small room in this Northern European town where I barely met a few friends in the last 2 months, where I had been there since the beginning of my appointment there. And of course, there was this very new idea that we had to be stuck within our little rooms with roommates or flatmates that weren't our friends. And so in the worst perhaps moment of March of the first lockdown, I started thinking of how to have a positive impact, or how to take some positive lessons out of what we were living that year. Something that was maybe a little less academic than what I had been used to in my publications and books, but something that had a stronger social impact. And just a little bit of personal. On a personal note, I was born in Sicily, in Palermo, like Federica, and I had left my hometown when I was 17 to go to the university, first in Milan for about 7 years, and then to the United States, Germany for a year, in Freiburg, in Breisgau, and afterwards in Luxembourg, as I was mentioning before. And throughout these 10 years that I lived elsewhere, I have always felt a sort of nostalgia for the territory that I was born in, which is, of course, as you know, a very difficult territory and full of contradictions. And also a wish to come back someday. That was something utopian, something like coming back to my region once I'll be retired. And instead, what happened was that my university in March started telling me that we were allowed to work remotely, and that at least until the end of that semester, where my contract was meant to be, we would spend the rest of the semester working from home. So I spoke to the embassy, and the embassy allowed me to come back to Sicily. And that's where I've been working on ever since the end of March 2020. At the end of my appointment in Luxembourg, I actually started researching at the University of Messina. So I actually managed to find that job that was filling my career and my academic qualifications. And this was a true change in my perspective, since the same day where I went back to Italy, I launched a pitch for this project, which is a movement, let's say a cultural movement that was started throughout Italy, from southern areas to inner areas. and that's called self-working in Italian, lavorare dal sud. And we are now an association of social promotion, social innovation, and we are backed by both the Fondazione con il Sud, which was mentioned earlier, which allowed us to actually become a bit more structured, and the Global Shapers community, which is community of young people, younger than 30-year-old, that are trying to advancing at a global level the objectives of the UN Sustainable Agenda for 2030. So I had this idea that perhaps thanks to remote working that we were first experiencing in March 2020, and that we have now been working with for a full year, we could somehow spend more periods of time, more time frames in the territories that we are most attached to. And by doing that, we could provide stimuli to those territories. And the idea is that we can work together as young professionals and young workers, young managers, young other types of professionals who now compose our team. And the idea was to take the lead on how to on suggesting new policy approaches. So not only working with the law, in my case, working with the legal interpretation, but also linking law and public policy and presenting public policy to the decision makers and in general to all stakeholders. And we did it in a very interdisciplinary team, I have to say, and I was very interested in the way Severine presented before the problems and difficulties of interdisciplinary research work. And I must say that at least within the legal field, it's already very hard to work with people that are from a different subject, a different type of law, like private law with public law. And so it has been astonishing to see how in this last year it's been possible to put together a group of young, highly qualified people that come from all kinds of different backgrounds, from law to economics to management to sociology to urbanism, urban planning, and try to tackle all together this new phenomenon that's basically made of young people like in their 30s, late 20s and early 30s, that have been experiencing periods of remote working from southern and inner Italy, and that are inspired by a wish to change and to improve those territories where the services and the infrastructures are lacking. And the idea is that remote working not only allows people to spend their salary in those territories that are usually depopulated, especially concerning intellectual migrations, which is something that our southern regions and Sicily especially has been witnessing in worsening trend since the early 2000s. So we've always been a land of migration, of emigration, as it's very well known, both towards the United States and in general America at since the end of the 19th century, but also towards Northern Europe, Germany in particular, and towards Northern Italy in the last waves. But the idea is that in the past 20 years, the number of highly professionalized, highly qualified people that are now leaving to find better job opportunities or better education opportunities, but who do not come back after learning more or becoming more educated. We are witnessing this so-called brain drain. I don't like the term, but yeah, that's perhaps the easiest way to see it. And so the idea is that we have all these territories, not only little towns, which is a little bit more where the debate has been focusing about, but also bigger towns, and even cities like mine, which has more than 1 million inhabitants, considering the nearby towns that are linked to the ecosystem of the city. And so the idea was exactly that we perceived these gaps that divide southern Italy from northern Italy, and big financial and productive districts like Milan from the rest of the regions, and the rest of the even inner areas of those central and northern regions. And in general, the idea that Italy as a whole is considered as a south of Europe and is still experiencing huge gaps, huge development gaps, if one does not consider the economy of Lombardy and Milan. And of course, it's a small idea, it's a small contribution that these remote workers that we call South workers can provide, but it's a positive impact. And again, I was saying, not only as an liquidity injection with the fact that we have been spending our salaries here for a whole year, but also in terms of investments, which can be investments of in new startups or in existing companies, or even we are witnessing people who are going back to family enterprises that had been left to look for better jobs and for a better, simpler career, and even new opportunities of giving back to the territories. So we are now seeing a desire for more volunteering activities, and I personally believe that this is also linked to the new debate and the new feelings that we have had in this last year since the pandemic hit, and sort of rebalancing our priorities, especially those of us who have been working hard to develop a specific career without looking much farther away. And again, this goes back to the lack of interdisciplinarity perspective that we are seeing in our education and in our academy, unfortunately. And the last impact that I believe that remote working can have on these territories that are kind of abandoned is the possibility that these people putting together ideas might work together on new ideas of projects to improve the lacking services and infrastructures, both in terms of education, healthcare system, and transportation systems that are seriously afflicting these peripheral or inner territories. And we have tried to focus on theoretization of what's been happening this year with this new phenomenon of South working, and the idea that how things were before COVID were actually not looking that good in terms of future development and future opportunities at all. So we are now, of course, witnessing a crisis, an economic crisis, and beyond the terrible healthcare crisis, but even the economic crisis has hit southern regions and regions that were less developed even more, and with the risk of no rebounding or not bouncing back. So with the idea that the new lower levels that we will have in our southern economies after the pandemic will stay stagnating at this lower level, while the economies of the northern, more productive regions has been hit perhaps even harder in this year, but will now bounce back with a much stronger force next year. Instead, what we had before, and if we think about what we were discussing in 2019, we had this brain drain, both from southern to northern regions and from Italy to the rest of the world. And this economy in recession or in stagnation, which had been like that since the 2008 crisis. And of course, the topic that we had been perhaps discussing more in 2019 had been quite correctly, I would say, since I feel partially Freiburger, climate change and the impact on Fridays for Future and climate activism as a new response to the inactivities or to the not sufficient activities of decision makers. So when the 2020 pandemic hit, we were faced with the unexpected. So the virus hit, and we were it was hard to adapt to it. But one thing that we had to immediately adapt to, at least in Italy, was the lockdown. So the reaction of asking people not to leave their homes. And we've started perceiving this remote working as perhaps mostly as a limitation, especially after 1 year. We are feeling isolated. We are feeling that we don't get to go out of our homes enough. But at the same time, we tried, again, I was saying, we were in that very hard situation in which many of us were alone. And we started connecting through video calls and remote socialization. And so we started seeing an opportunity in what remote working can give us after the pandemic. So the idea that we might work with those people who voluntarily would decide to spend some periods of time in these areas, in south or in inner areas, for companies based elsewhere in the center to the north, big cities of Italy, or even abroad, as I was saying, with the possibility to reinvest their salaries in southern economies, but also in real estate, financial investments, startups, and investing especially their time in new social projects and volunteering, and again giving back to that community that you get to live in and work in these periods of time. And this might lead, again, we are talking about small numbers, but I believe that these South workers can be seeds to improve the stagnating ecosystem of those territories. So we have worked not only on the basic ideas, so the charter of values, our ethical charter that drives us as a community, and we are now in our Facebook community about 10,000 people, and we have also partnered with research centers as SVIMEDS, which is the Italian National Association for the Development of Industries in Southern Italy. And we have calculated, or rather estimated, that only in 2020 we have had about more than 100,000 South workers in southern regions. So we already have a little grip on what kind of data we're talking about. We have launched several questionnaires and surveys to understand what the typical features of this type of workers who have the willingness to spend these periods of time even before all services and all infrastructures are improved. And we have tried to differentiate our policy proposal from a mere remote working from home or working from home. So we have explored the world of agile work, and we are suggesting basically that people should work based on productivity and on goals, and not anymore on the number of hours worked, and also that we should not be working from home, but working from community hubs that are co-working spaces, but also these other types of community hubs. And I tried to put together here something about these community hubs, which is maybe the most important part of our proposal, and maybe we can discuss it further if you wish in the Q&A section. But basically, we're suggesting that we have a very huge amount of underused or unused buildings in public and private property in southern and inner regions, and these can be easily reused or repurposed and regenerated as community hubs, so places where people can go to work and have organized working docks, but also at the same time suggesting that these might become places where the local community meets the South workers community, and therefore there can be a mutual learning moment between those people that have had experiences perhaps internationally or at the national level and the people who stayed. And so we suggest that there could be an improvement of this type of relationship, often in places, especially little towns, where all the occasions of social gathering are less and less, especially considering the even less number of cinemas and movie theaters and community places. And we are suggesting and we are requiring the municipalities that want to work with us that they at least provide 3 prerequisites, which are showed in these maps, that are a sufficient stable internet connection in order to be able to do some effective remote working, but also some sufficient transportation systems that may have people go to the nearest airport or high-speed train station within 2 hours, which is already a lot, but this is already hard to achieve. And the presence of at least one of these community hubs in the municipality space, in the municipality territory. And I wanted to briefly show you an example. We are not creating working ourselves as an organization, but we are creating networks among these realities, among these new ideas. And we are partnering with local institutions, local associations, and local municipalities to explain what can be done. For example, this is a little town in the province of Palermo, Castelbuono, where a local association has convinced the public bodies in the municipality, but also the restaurants and the Airbnbs and other places where you can get a house to partner and create the first South working hub that we are partnering with them, and they have identified 3 spaces that were underused by the municipality, and one is this castle from 1300, which hosts the local museum, but which had a lot of wasted space, and so they managed to create some co-working working stations within that space, but also within cloister from some Franciscan monks that was no more used, was the headquarters of the Museum of Nature in that area, and so they managed to create another space. And the third one was in a 19th century building that was also a part of the municipality buildings, and in each of them they created about 8 working spaces. So now they have about 25 working stations in their little town, which has about 5,000 inhabitants, and is located in the mountains. So it's not even on the sea, it's not even in one of the perhaps most famous parts of Sicily. And they have been working, I must say, extremely well. And I think this is a perfect case study. And we are trying to monitor with them by counting and using data from the use of these spaces. And we are now in the process of including about 25 different municipalities all over southern Italy within this, we call it network of municipalities for South working. So this is the idea, and we have started by mapping the co-working spaces that already exist, both private and public, And we this is the map. Nowadays it's in a 1.0 version, but we are partnering with some web developers and geocoding GIS experts to have a 2.0 version in the next few months that will also present the services that each co-working offers, not only within the co-working, but also the public services that are offered in the nearby area, in order to allow for especially female workers who still have to endure the difficulties of handling both a job and the family care, to know where kindergartens and other facilities are located in these areas. Yeah, this is what I wanted to share, my vision of a possible South that changes how the perception of Sicily and of Southern Italy and of Italy in general is, with the help of those people, those young professionals that have learned and have navigated different approaches and different types of work, and that are now willing to give back something to their communities. So thank you for your attention and for your invitation.
Thank you very much, Elena. I think it was very nice that you took us on a personal experience into South work, and also showed a little bit how you work, what this cultural movement is about, and also I think what is also very current topic is this remote working and how to implement it also somehow in space. I think what is like interesting but also very challenging is now to how to bring this together, and how to think about this working interdisciplinary teams, how to think and realize the possibilities of co-working, collectivity and creativity. And I personally found very interesting these two perspectives, the one more theoretical and reflective perspective on sociology and architecture, and the more, let's say, practical approach or idea for a movement to combine like networks of younger people and social projects and how to implement them. And I think both look at same intersections, and one is the territories and networks and the social behind, and the other is definitely also connected to this. And I think we as architects and urban designers are very much interested in how these ideas can be connected, and how they become to a recreation of space and the design process behind it. And this is, I think, something you mentioned already with the example you showed now, Elena. And I would actually maybe just as a short point ask you too, if you have maybe an open question to the other person, something that has remained unclear. And then I would give the word to the students who have prepared some questions for you. Just a short first question, if you have something for Severine or Elena, for or the other way around.
I would have one, if I may. I find it super interesting and also quite, I mean, what you show, it's actually kind of what we would call a refiguration of spaces, where actually you have really different special figures, like territorial figures, maybe the more network figures and so on, that are actually not, it's not anymore about, and I'm staying there and I'm really like somehow caring for the territorial, and it's not only like, oh, I'm going abroad and I'm trying to somehow be part of all this network, but it's much more interconnected. And it's I find it really interesting that it's typically something we would actually investigate at the CSC in order to understand how the space is just, I mean, what I've said, the intersection between spatial and social is changing right now, like in course of the globalization and the digitalization, because obviously without this the digital infrastructure, it wouldn't be possible to work remotely. So it's really like, actually it's really having some resonance or with what we are doing, or trying to think on a much more theoretical level, obviously. But I would have like one question, and it's because you insist a lot about this generational effect, that it's about young people under 20. I mean, it seems that you have a really short somehow generation, like at the end of 20, at the beginning of 30. So and I don't know, do you have any explanation why it's or do you have maybe more precision or characteristic of the social group that you're somehow, that is part of this movement? And if don't know, do you have any families in there, just give more male, more female? I don't know, I would be just curious to hear a bit more on who is taking part.
Thank you so much for your question, and I have to say that I'm very interested in this, in what you were presenting at a theoretical level, on how to put together the work of these people, in considering that we are now 60 volunteers. And we started in 7, and we were already doing pretty different things back then, but now we have all kinds of people, from physicians to web developers to urbanists to sociologists, and of course lawyers, and it's been a really even hard to put together this type of people and all the different aspects of the project, which has a more scientific part in partnership with research centers and university, more of an advocacy part, and the dialogues with local, regional, and national heads of government, and like the Ministry for South and territorial cohesion in Italy, and the part of creating networks and working with local associations. So it would be extremely interesting, I believe, to apply this theory to this type of interdisciplinary work. As to the identity, what we call identikit, or typical portrait of of the people interested in our movement, we have analyzed both data from our Facebook page, and we have launched a survey that had more than 2,500 responses, and where it was totally anonymous, but we were asking both questions about their propension to work remotely, and their age and gender and type of employment, and type of education. And what emerged was that the people interested were people that already had some kind of experience, so not people that were just out of university. And again, so I was saying about 27 to 20-year-old, and on the upper edge it was about 40-year-old. And we linked that to having children, because as I was mentioning, we in southern and inner regions, we still have a very bad proportion, for example, of spots in kindergarten as compared to mothers, or as compared to kids, of course. So I believe it's easier for young people who already have a job but do not have a family yet, which is something that's also linked to, I believe, statistics about population in Italy, and the fact that we are, I believe, the oldest country for women to have kids in. I believe that now the average is about 35-year-old. So this is, I believe, it would be interesting to link it. We have partnered with Bocconi University, which is my alma mater, which is my university, the university where I graduated, and with a professor that deals with diversity and inclusion and the impact of smart work, what we call in Italy smart working, so remote working, with an agile approach on women, and the fact that it's been actually very hard for working mothers to work remotely this year, and to maintain that level of productivity that instead for men or women without children is actually higher when when you start working, as I was saying, with productivity indicators instead than just time sheets and hour frames. I believe that the idea is that people are interested or are more braver when they don't have schools to bring kids to, especially kindergarten. I believe it's a very important part of how a young working mother should be able to juggle the two parts of her life.
Thank you. Sorry, I interrupt. Sorry, I'm a little bit crude. I just would like to link a little bit to the students, because I think they address some of the topics that you already mentioned, and it would be sad if they don't have the time. So the stage is for you, students.
Thanks. Thank you very much for your presentations. I'm going to start with the first part, which is quick individual questions. So the first one goes to Severine Marguin, and is as COVID-19 has made a very profound impact in our lives in a very short time, how did it influence your work as a sociologist?
Yeah, I mean, I could relay on what Elena was doing, because I am the mother of 3 actually, and I was also quite tempted to go back to south of France. Actually, even although I have quite a, I don't want to leave Berlin, but yeah, it was really actually it was really hard to keep working with the kids at home. So it was about like not having any care, childcare, and I think, I mean, that the first part, because we have kids, but I think also like within the academia, it's it's surely, it's really what you've said, Elena, that it's somehow increasing the competition between the different people who has to, I mean, we have to publish, we have to, just be active, and for people with care duties and or without, then it had definitely increased this gap. So I would say that is more on this existential part, that it was quite difficult. And on the other way, and also like when we're talking about interdisciplinarity, exchange, collaboration between colleagues, but I mean, it's the same for you, for you guys, the students, that you also have had to work together. And what does it mean to work together virtually, not meeting, not speaking, other than through this, what we are doing right now? I mean, I would much prefer to be in Hanover and be with you guys in a room. But I think it has a big impact on the way we think together. And I'm not sure we are, I mean, I don't know how much we know yet about what it's doing with us, So I'm for sure to develop mapping. It's so hard to do that virtually. And okay, we have all this nice instrument, Miro and so on, the stuff you are surely using, but it's not the same that putting the stuff on the wall and just, scribbling with the sub. So I think we are all learning and struggling with these challenges, definitely. And you're hearing Slack because it's, I think, with my students putting their work for tomorrow. We'll shut up.
I'll go on. Thank you for the lecture first. We heard a lot of co-working spaces, presence or remote working. Severine, you state that still physical co-presence is the prerequisite for existing and new collaborations. How do you think these home offices and the lack of physical co-presence will affect our society and interaction? After we heard about the South Working program and
I mean, that was, I mean, it was impossible to present the different stuff I've met, but in this experimental zone project we made, where we tried to, I mean, it was before Corona, obviously, huh? It was 2015, 2018, what about the role of space and collaboration. And it became quite clear, actually, that, I mean, the bold thesis we came to at the end of the project is that actually we need a kind of inversion of the architecture at the university right now. So so that actually we should all work in open studio and I mean in open space and work like for all the individual work, we can do that next to each other if we can assure that this co-presence of different practices is okay, so that we don't somehow how do you say that stören, that we don't be an nuisance for the others. But and actually the room that are for now shared, where you have to leave your workplace for the moment, and you leave the workplace, your individual workplace, to go to meet people. I mean, not in Corona time, let's say before that. And actually it would be inverse, that actually you leave your workplace if you want to have some retreat and some silence and some, really concentrated work. So that was actually the thesis we came upon. And we've thought a lot with my colleague Henrike about how much is this still somehow a claim that we can do after Corona or during Corona. We're not quite yet finished with that. And actually, back then we had a really homogeneous, we had a lot of people working in this hybrid, working at the cluster, working in laboratories, working at home, working. I mean, it was not like people coming every day, working every time there, They were really like flexible. So a bit like, I think, the situation we will come to after COVID, when we are able to go back to the university and we will mix actually really different places. But still, I think we need co-presence just in order to be aware of the others and somehow familiarize ourselves with their work, with the way they're thinking, with the way they're just like, producing this knowledge. And as it was a really strong result, and it's quite. I mean, I can't predict the future. I'm just a sociologist. I'm not doing any projection like designers, but I think we will see. I think we will definitely need more, need the others again after COVID. But I mean, that would be a nice, actually, really nice question for Elena. How do you deal with that you can't see or experience your actually really close co-worker from the international firm you're employed in, or are you going there, or how do you deal with this remote in your daily work? If I may, now I'm really doing like queer questions, sorry.
No, sorry.
Last questions. So the idea that we have had is that people should be able to spend periods of time with their original co-workers. So perhaps overcoming the fully remote idea and organizing their work so that they can put together the days where they have to have meetings in person, no more than once per month, considering the impact of flying, as France is showing us by banning short distance flights. And therefore, the idea should be that meetings that team building meetings and creative sprint meetings should still be held in person, as well as meetings with important customers or clients or users that are really attached to all in-person meetings, as well as perhaps conferences, as can be the case in our academic work. But it's also true that perhaps we wouldn't have been able to make it to Hannover in our former life. So I believe, and the number of webinars and conferences that I've been able to attend this year is sincerely much higher than what I could have afforded by flying, because here my university cannot pay me for all this kind of travels. So I tend to see the positive side in it, and as a general proposal to suggest to corporations that they organize their monthly work according to when it is actually needed that people meet in person.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Diana, sorry.
Yeah, so can we come to the next question? So we extracted a statement out of the original context from Severine Marguin's essay, Architectural Experiments. And you state that open, transparent typologies such as open plan offices are especially suitable in order to encourage interdisciplinary collaborations, which implies physical presence in this case. Couldn't this also be said about the vision of interdisciplinary collaboration through remote working in an even grander scale? Where could possibilities lie in an effective and close collaboration between sociology and digital infrastructure?
I think it's a kind of, I interpret your question as a kind of continuation of the question asked by Karen. And I mean, one of the finding of the experimental zone project was that actually you need time to somehow get familiarized, as I said, with the others that you don't know, with the other way of doing stuff. And you need a lot of conversation just in order to understand how the others are somehow thinking. And I mean, we could observe that in the room, you know, in the very place of the experimental zone, how the people get progressively get to know each other and come into contact. And then through the setting, at the beginning, they all the very first setting was, okay, you can place your desk where you want, and they all was alone, you know, even if they already known each other, a couple of them known each other. But then through the setting, they really develop a kind of the group territory, as we called it, where the people actually build some island in order to be next to each other. And yeah, this proximity, like the lack of distance, of physical distance, was really something really important, also because they were able to do their stuff alone and then without really moving, just like somehow fusioning the other space of research from the other one. So it was really something like I would say that like something that was really flexible and organic, let's say. And I think if we try to somehow displace that within the virtual world, then I think we need there are a lot of this new instrument, how to communicate, how to somehow be together even if we are not in the same rooms at the same place, and be able to communicate a lot and maybe really on the side without really noticing it. But I think it's much more difficult we have to learn the new way how to do that and to have the right instrument in order to organize this communication. And I can't somehow provide myself to think, okay, where does the body go in this all virtual stuff that we have? You know, it's a really bodiless communication. And I think that is something we had so many observations how people become aware of the others just because they were sharing actually like an atmosphere and the presence that we are all bodies in a room all together, and we are making this specific space because we are interacting. And obviously through the virtual, then it's much more difficult to, I mean, something gets lost. And we all, and it's not, I mean, I'm not doing the traditionalist, like, because I totally agree with Elena that I wouldn't be able to go to Hanover today, actually, if, and I'm so happy that we could do that on the digital way, you know, so that's really fine. But yeah, what do we, yeah, it's still really bodiless. I have to say, I hate that. But, yeah.
I don't know if Elena wants to add something as well. If not, we would sum it up with our last part in regard to the new European Bauhaus. And us four, we were especially wondering in regard to the new European Bauhaus, the proposed European Bauhaus will be the first interpretation of how our built environment will become to look like under the influence of post-COVID, as we all talked about now, and digitalization, of course, and especially the climate change in the end. In our research, we saw the video interview in regard to the flight of the populace back to rural places on the Il Fatto Quotidiano 2 months ago, with Elena took part in. And one of the guests, Stefano Boeri, stated that a re-equilibration of our current urban situation, especially in cities, is needed in regard to the neglected and desolate rural areas, which is quite interesting for us, as it is basically our topic to give this first interpretation of how the European Bauhaus can re-equilibrate this situation. So our question, and hopefully it would be like a little starter for the rest of the time for much more ideas for other people as well, is what would you imagine a possible contribution of your society or your association, Elena, of South working or sociologists in general could be?
Thank you, Nicola. And yeah, it's been a very heated topic of debate in Italy since the position of Professor Boeri has been accused of lingering on a nostalgic idea that the returning to these borghi, to these little towns, would be as easy as coming back to a big town like Palermo or Naples. And so instead, we are trying to focus on what's achievable and what's harder to get. So most of our South workers are actually coming back to big cities in southern Italy, where at least minimum services and infrastructures are granted, where airports are nearby, and where the work to install high-speed internet has been completed in the past years. And especially in big region city that lead regions like Palermo or Naples or Bari, we already have a co-working network. So that's why we suggested this idea as something easily feasible, and that's easily been done in this first year. We are also working with little towns like the one that I showed you. But these are more prototypes, and we are in our Osservatorio, so our research center that tries to look at the phenomenon from an interdisciplinary perspective, trying to understand what are the main difficulties and trying to map which are the parts of the countryside or not even rural areas, but because we're also speaking about towns that are 5,000 to 10,000 people inhabitants, or even towns that used to be 50,000 inhabitants and now only have 10,000, which might still be considered a town, but is of course facing a huge depopulation project. And in fact, I'm also part of the Liminal project, which puts together a series of architects and urban planners to reimagine new ways to face this difficult problem of depopulated little towns that are far away from services and infrastructures. But I would be extremely interested to hear what sociologists like Severine could imagine for the future of these towns.
I mean, I'm not sure I can but I do have a question. Because it's striking, and again I'm bringing the human factor within the discussion. But you spoke a lot about like the people coming back to the bigger town because of infrastructure, so they can have like internet and connection and facilities and mobility for the mobility and so on. But don't you think there is also like it's a question of lifestyle as well? I mean, it's there is quite a lot of sociological or geographical also analysis of this neo-rural phenomena where people from a big city come back into the hinterland, and it's in different countries, not only Italy, in Portugal, in France, in Germany, and so on. And when it came to the clash of culture, you see a lifestyle, because in the way of dealing with religion, with sexuality, with family model, with picture of the way of thinking the women. I mean, would say feminism, and so on. And I think it would be just fascinating for sociologists or anthropologists to just go into this small village and to observe how these people are coming along, and where is, because it's not just about infrastructure, it's also about like building a community and filling somehow this way of belonging into this territory. And how it is also seen that they've gone and they come back and so on, all this kind of, yes, I think, it's about identity and belonging, and that would be just fascinating. But it's all in the making right now, so it's
exactly, it's in the making, and we have this prototypes that I was mentioning before. I think each would deserve deepen more in-depth of observation, because these are all little towns, again this type of 5,000 to 10,000 people, and we are seeing these as experiments. We are also very rationally saying that this will only be a little part of the bigger phenomenon, but I also believe that it's very important to see it's a part of a perceived better quality of life, that it's in general in the south, including big cities in the south, and especially in rural towns. What we are saying is that once you move into the countryside or into a little town where you don't have a kindergarten, or the nearest hospital is 30 minutes away, and also we are facing the problem that there's not a big that much of a big cultural social life, and many of us left these spaces and these places in quest for a better, more stimulating life. So it's that's what we are trying to revitalize with these community hubs, with the idea that there are a lot of potential, a lot of talents within these communities that are not fully expressing what they're saying, what they have inside. But of course, it's more of case study than a general phenomenon as the one that we are seeing towards bigger cities in southern Italy.
Mm-hmm. I have maybe one more question, which regards maybe both of you, which is about thinking of like bridging a little bit more the practice, theory, and research. And I think I see this in South Working because there are many people working with it. And as you, Severine, you also do practical experiments. I would like to ask you both, like, where do you see possibilities also to interconnect more these different fields, and which like to really provide projects that activate space and link it more to the actual environments?
You want to go first, or I should? I mean, that's a really interesting question, and I think for sociologists, it's mostly for qualitative sociology, like somehow the field where I come from, it's always like a big issue on of keeping the autonomy of what you want to do. So it's always a bit like when I said earlier that sometimes architects are laughing at us, that we are a bit afraid of action, or that we are like somehow keeping ourselves safe into the ivory tower of theory. I think it's also because it's really important, or let's say it's essential that for me it's essential that I keep the freedom of doing what I want to do, what I find for relevant. And obviously I have to apply for some money, and I have to do all this third-part funding stuff, and it's taking a lot of time. But surely when I somehow respect the rules of doing that, then I get actually to do what I want to do somehow, not, don't have to, it's not really annihilated. And it's always a bit like when you can closer to the application, to the action, and to that, then you have actually people who, and not the people you want to work with in order to understand something, much more the people who are giving the money, that who can become a bit more somehow dominant, or try to reorientate the project. And the main reason why we are a bit scary of action, that we want to actually be able to decide what we want to do. And but obviously when you can find somehow, I mean, the best part would be to be autonomous, a bit like what we've done at the cluster, and what we are about to begin a new project with Henrike in Humboldt Labor. It's you surely heard of the Humboldt Forum, the new Prussian castle in Berlin, this ugly thing. That the Humboldt-University have a small dependency, let's say, within the castle, where they are. It's function like a research museum, actually. And we are about to start an experimental, like actually really on the model of the experimental zone within the museum. So trying to understand the impact or the role of space on the co-production of knowledge, like doing actually visitor studies on an experimental design-based way. So we want to, for the same, and we are working for that. We're working really closely with the curatorial team, actually. So trying to, with them, think about different design exhibition design, and trying to see if somehow the knowledge is translated or understood differently depending on the. And so I think you understand a bit what we aim to do. And the thing is, it's really actually applied in a way, but actually we're still really able to take a lot of our time to think about space, to think about co-production of knowledge, to think with the curatorial team, what does it mean, and so on. So it's really free, it's a kind of design-based autonomous research project. And that, for me, that's a bit like the direction I want to take, and I want to somehow marry in a really projective way the trying stuff and projecting and then testing and so on, but not only in order to please the people who give me the money, but in order really to produce free thinking, if you want.
If I may, very briefly, before we run out of time, I just wanted to underline that our project was born exactly on the premise that there was some dissatisfaction with the way academia works, at least in Europe. So a bit of this sense of ivory tower isolation that was further exacerbated by the lockdown. So having to write your goals in your little room, even if you were a researcher, a young researcher. So you were supposed to be very proud of yourself. And this need that many, I think, we as young people perceived, that we also wanted to have an impact on how the actual people are doing, and how the people out there are experiencing. So we have built this internal structure of the association, where we both have a strong advocacy part, cultural movement, and policy proposals design that have had quite a lot of success in the relationship with both the press and the national government, with an endorsement by both the former president of the Council of Ministers and the current minister for Southern Affairs and Cohesion. But at the same time, we're trying to be very communicative. So we are working a lot on our social media effort, which is something that's still lacking in many parts of the academia. And we are also working on the research center part. So we have put together a series of partnerships with different research centers and universities and different faculties, because we want to be working on the phenomenon itself from different perspectives. And what we are now doing is actually publishing a report of what this first year was about, including contributions from professors that come from a whole array of subjects, something that I think I would never have dreamed of doing in my previous research work. So the objective is to, in Italy, universities have this thing which is called the third mission, which is not only research and teaching, but also social impact. And I believe this is the first time where I've actually felt like I was contributing to a proper social impact, with people benefiting from this kind of discourse, this kind of intervention directly, while at the same time perceiving the need for more theoretical research at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
May I? Now, as urbanists, we are used to gain knowledge about society through looking at space. No, space is our entrance. We observe changes and trends, no, that give insights into what happens in society. And basically, I think, no, what we observe are really changes in a new role of concentration, no, and a new role of community. That in our interest, no, is to link this to resilience and to the topics of climate change, no, and I'm quite convinced that in this that there are a lot of chances in these new constellations of work. Now, at the same time, we are always looking into the mechanisms how space changes, and this would be, let's say, very interesting for me to find out how this, and not only Corona, no, but the changes of the last 10 years changed the attitude of people towards space and the ways they are dealing with it, no? And for example, no, what Elena showed about recognizing opportunities that we before maybe didn't saw, and being actively part of urban change in some way. In this context, my question to you both would be, how can we extend better to people outside of this, let's say, academic circle or knowledge economy we are all quite stuck in, no? And I think this is very relevant for two reasons. One is really about the social and economic dimension of the change, no? That this can't be only about academics, but also about other professions, and they also experience the influence of digitalization, no? But probably in other ways than we do. And secondly, now that facing climate change and in the context of the Green Deal, no, I believe that we have to create new systems and new exchange, especially with non-academic partners, no, and really also in the production field, let's say, you know, that are dealing with materials, that are dealing with resources. And all this for me is still quite obscure. No, how to get to these new linkages. And like we ask our students in the course this summer, now for their projects to relate to at least one person, better 2 or 3, that not only come from other disciplines, but that maybe really come from the places they are working on and that are really running a social activity, a business activity. And I'm very curious about this little experiment, if it can work, no, and what will come out, no, and this, no, Elena and Severine, I would be really interested in your, let's say, view on this, how to get out of the academic circles we are moving in, no? I think it's difficult.
Should I go first?
Yeah, please. I always go first, so please do.
I feel personally interested in this because I'm trying to actually do it more in my personal and academic life. And I have to say that the idea of the association was exactly put together by the initial part was me and another researcher, but also some managers and engineers, product engineers, and sociologists and graphic designers. So it was from the very beginning something that was inside and outside academia. And I have to say that, again, I've learned much more than perhaps in the 27 years before my life in this last year. And jokes is, I like to joke by saying that I had never spoken to an engineer before founding this association. And now it's a daily thing. And I have to say that I've learned a lot from both the perspective of the managers themselves. So people who are used to managing a project or managing a team. And that's something that I wasn't used to, at all, since I had always been part of research teams as the youngest researcher. And at the same time, by the way that engineers and STEM people look at the world by coming from a human science perspective. And I've also perceived more the need to quantify phenomena and visualize data, which was something that, at least in legal issues, was not used at all. And now we are trying to not only partner with research centers and universities, but also corporations that are interested in the process itself of digitalization and reducing the digital divide, like our partnership with the main internet fiber company in Italy, which is called Open Fiber, or partnerships with private co-working spaces, and the fact that we are trying to get them in a network. And thirdly, with employers, so with the corporations that are based in the north or in the center of Italy, and that have a propension towards remote working, so do not have a cultural mindset against it, as some others in Italy unfortunately do. And so working with them by telling their stories and telling the stories of their worker. So this is exactly the ground that we have founded the association and the project on, and I believe it's working. It's been hard. We have to say that we are seeing different projects every day nowadays, and it's again, as I was mentioning, it's fundamentally funny exercise to put together these people and learning together. And I was particularly hit, I want to say, by in conclusion, by Severine's idea of changing the spaces of academia, changing how the faculties are located, office spaces are located, even for young researchers and full professors, and the way that people might meet. Well, at least here or in Luxembourg, we had a different faculty which was located in a different neighborhood of the city for law and economics than people in architecture or urban planning. So I had never met an architect in my university life before.
Mm-hmm. No, this is really very interesting. Let's say the starting idea now of the South working is to let's say to work for a company, for example, in Milan, but to be in Palermo, no? And that's clever. And I think this will go ahead also after Corona, no? In some way. Question: will this influence the digitalization of the economy in Sicily in some way? Do you have examples for this?
Yeah, I have to say that we are witnessing an improvement in the connections. We still have some areas which are not unfortunately covered by fiber, but we have seen also a spike in new satellite internet connections. Also we were looking at new startups, as I was saying before. So there are people who have decided to come back not only for periods of time, but also to create something here. And I wanted to mention a couple examples of coding companies. So companies that are not only coding themselves, but for companies based elsewhere, but also educating and training young people that maybe did not know about this opportunity before. And another idea of people that are actually quitting their jobs, especially we've seen examples from after the Brexit and during the pandemic, from people who used to live in London and who perceived that their life would not be there after Brexit, and are now launching startups based here in Sicily, and they are looking for like-minded people, like-minded South worker. So what we aim to do in the next year is to allow these people to talk to each other, to find shared interests, common interests, and mapping them, allowing them to see nearby South worker with whom to launch new ideas or launch new communities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In a parallel project, we are working about bioeconomy and circular economy, you know, in Southern Europe. And one of the case studies is orange fiber. Probably you know, every Sicilian knows it, no? And this for me is a really interesting example, no? Because they already worked between Milan and Catania, now in something new, no? And but in the end, no, really, they managed, no, to implement territorial innovation in Sicily itself, no.
We have this thing called Sicilian Valley that's going to be launched soon. That's a website and a network that puts together all these new innovative digital innovation and social innovation projects in Sicily. So I will be sending it to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe for Severine, no, this to go beyond the knowledge economy also in some way. It's difficult, no? I think also the people going outside of Berlin, they are basically in the academic professions, no? And is this a closed world or no?
Yeah, it is surely a closed world, and I think, I mean, I think I would have two like kind of ambivalent answer to that. The first one would be that I mean, for example, we just started a project, a teaching project about the botanical garden in Berlin, and trying to understand the knowledge production there between actually the scientific there and the citizen group. because there is, in this kind of field, you have a lot of people actually, you have actually this frontier between the scientific and the academic side, and the much more lay side. And I think that for me, for my posture, I try to, at my really small level, to implement a kind of not research, not searching on people, but with people, and making actually the results and the finding I have immediately available, and immediately like trying to give it back, or to actually just give it, make it available what we produced together. I think that the first part, and it sounds maybe small, but I think it's still actually a minor. It's still a really minor finding. I mean, when I look at all my sociologist colleagues, then no one do that. I mean, it's already like, you know, they all just published actually some really jargonic book but social theory, or about you know, that no one understands outside of the community. But then I come to my second point, that actually I still believe in the kind of division of labor, that I am, because I really believe in basic research, and I really believe in all this theoretical apparatus that we are constructed, you know, that we are constructing right now. And that it's because the world is so complex, and it's so difficult to understand anything out there, out of my desk and out of, you know, that actually it takes all my time to do that. And it's also okay. I think we don't have, it's, let's say that like that. Sometimes I feel also like a really strong imperative that I have to produce, on the one hand, really high theoretical, peer-reviewed, blah, blah stuff for my really specialized community. And then on the other hand, I have also to do all the scientific communication work. And then on the other hand, you know, and then I just think, wait a minute, how I don't have the time and the capacity, even if I'm working a lot, to do that. And so I think it's always a kind of negotiation and play with this external pressure we could have at the university. And I think it's a really, what we have to do anyway is actually be able, as scientific, to go out of the ivory tower and to be able to speak about what we are doing to everyone. I think these skills we have to learn, but I'm not sure I have to do the job of then somehow distributing this knowledge somewhere else, you know. I think it's different. It's too much for one person. It's not possible to understand the social theory since 200 years and then trying to give a bit, you know, to that, and then it's a bit too much for one person. So yeah, that would be my ambivalent answer. But as you see, it's not really fixed yet. Just still working on it.
That's maybe this is a bit easier, no, for the architects and urbanists, because basically our basic research is project-based, no, and we always have the direct linkages, no. This produces a lot of other problems, no, that of clarity, of definition, and so on, no. But in this, let's say, basically transdisciplinary outset that we are having, no, it's more direct. Big problem for us is transferability, no, since all the gained knowledge is really very much context related. That's so maybe the linkages are a bit easier, no, but really transferability is the big question mark, and that's. I'm very interested in working always internationally, you know, and we look at Italy and Spain, and this is very interesting, but sometimes also deceiving, because city depends really on local contexts and frameworks and legal frameworks, cultural frameworks that make transfer really difficult, no?
Yeah, but I would say then to that, for example, in the sociology, I think we are really good skilled. I mean, I completely agree with you that you are far better skilled with transdisciplinarity that we are. I think in the sociology, on the other hand, we are really good actually at comparing or trying to do comparison and trying to understand, okay, how can, but again, it costs just a huge amount of time in order to be able to abstract somehow the finding into a kind of generic level when you can compare, I don't know, for example, the logic of the city or the different structure that you can see in both on the economical, cultural, social, and political and so on level, and then trying to just find like, yeah, an analytical way in order to compare the two situations. But then it's, yeah, again, it's to do that, it's then you need a couple of years. That's the thing, you know, and it's yeah. But then again, maybe then it's nice to work together, because that typically the thing that we can do a bit more quicker than you, and otherwise you do, you know, just like somehow really complementing actually idea behind that.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree, and I'm actually working 2 jobs basically at the moment, barely getting any sleep by being both an academic and an activist, let's say.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not even a question that we will solve today, I guess.
No. This, let's say, interesting is to discover new possibilities, no, and in both ways, no. And I guess I really don't know anything, no, but I guess that teleworking, home office, and stuff, no, will produce a lot of juridic questions too, Elena, no. So that maybe, let's say, also your original fields, no, can be repositioned in some way, no, through this new experience. Maybe.
I hope so.
Okay. I would propose that we leave it until here today. I think it was really a very nice dialogue. It was really a dialogue, I think. And I would just shortly maybe capture some keywords that to bring a little bit together. It's not a reflection on it, but just some things that were falling down, which was a necessity of co-presence, co-production of knowledge, possibilities and challenges of remote work, lifestyle of the new rural, then maybe the research, design, and social impact of it, new systems and new exchanges, and changing space and launching new ideas with people. And of course, the negotiation and play with scientific outgoing and how to expand this vision somehow. I would like to thank you too very, very much for participating, and also a big thanks to the students for preparing the questions. And I think this worked very, very well. I'm happy about this. And yes, I hope we see you again very soon, maybe also to continue the dialogue. And I hope we maybe also created some new intersection. And yes, thank you all. And the next talk of this dialogue series will be the 18th of May. And if you're interested, I can send you also the link. And otherwise, for the others, we will see in the class. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you again for the invitation.
So much, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I'm grateful as well.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.